Hello there, and welcome to Star Wars Music Minute, a show that celebrates Star Wars through music and sound. Each episode revolves around 5 cinematic minutes, so by the end of the season, you will hopefully know something about the music in every minute of the film we're on. I'm Chrysanthi Tan. Joining me today is my friend James Waterman, and today's episode is about minutes 11 through 15 of The Last Jedi. Hi, James. Super excited to have you.
Hi, Chrysanthi. Thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
This is a great set of minutes, and I look forward to having your percussionist perspective on things.
Yeah.
So you better bring
it. This is my probably my favorite Star Wars film, which I know is a pretty controversial thing to say these days. But so I'm excited, and this is actually a big chunk of some of my favorite moments of the film. So I'm really excited to talk about it.
Oh, nice. Let's describe the action of this scene. So jump in if I'm missing anything. But in this handful of minutes, it seems that we have Paige reaching the top of the ladder, tries to grab the clicker, slips, and falls down the shaft without the clicker in her hand. She kind of gets knocked out, and when she comes to, she's staring up at the clicker and knows what she has to do. So she starts kicking and the clicker ends up falling down, and she does the thing. She sacrifices herself, presses the button, the bombs are deployed. She falls down with her ship, the Cobalt, and then we see the Fulminatrix being decimated, being destroyed. Mm-hmm. We see Captain Kennedy in his last moments, looking pissed. And then
looking like all of his incompetent First Order help has truly failed him.
Truly.
They should have acted, what was it, 6 bloody minutes ago or whatever, 10 bloody minutes ago?
Yeah, they're so incompetent, too incompetent for him. And so they're dying as a result of it. And then we see, the Resistance is cheering. They're like, what do they say? Fulminatrix down? No, they say the name of the
Dreadnought
ship.
down.
Dreadnought down.
Yeah.
And then Leia it seems that people know that Paige is no longer with us. And Leia sighs and sits down. And then we see Hux kind of getting a little bit of a ribbing from Snoke, who wants to talk to him. Then there's so much that happens in these minutes. I can't believe we're still describing the same 5 minutes. And then we see Finn waking up from his coma, leaking water as he squeaks around.
Yes.
And he's like, "Where's Rey?" And then we join Rey on Ahch-To with some beautiful scenery, some nice sweeping drone shots, and
Skellig Michael in Ireland, gorgeous.
Oh, yes. And then we see her handing Luke the lightsaber. He holds it and then tosses it.
And then the internet exploded, of course, shortly thereafter.
Oh yeah.
People for 2 years wondering what was he going to do next, and sure enough, over the shoulder.
Oh yes. Picking up right where The Force Awakens left off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With a slightly different hairdo. If you really look at either scene, you can see it's Ryan made some creative changes to his hairdo. It's actually kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting because you look at the scene. It might be just a continuity thing where it's like we're literally just shooting, a year later. But it's really interesting when you look at Luke at the end of The Force Awakens. He looks like this, like what you would think Luke would have looked like. What every fan had in the back of their mind, like, oh, big prestigious Jedi Knight. But I feel like he looks more defeated in The Last Jedi, even though it's the same moment. And it's really easily just thematically, it looks like, kind of foreshadows what his mindset is going to be actually like in The Last Jedi. So I found that interesting. I'm like, ooh, he doesn't look as stoic. He almost looks more brooding and dark in The Last Jedi, even though it's the same frame technically, right?
Interesting. I didn't notice the hairdo thing. I noticed that the shot angle was so different.
Yeah.
It's
almost
The
like
Force
it's a
Awakens. Yeah, in The Force Awakens, I don't know, it felt like she's looking up to this godlike figure It's like, here you go. And in this one, it just, it seems, I don't know what it is about it. So,
Yeah.
I'm not a cinematography
Darker or more
expert.
Confined? Yeah, likewise. I mean,
that's not
this is
where our strength lies, but
exactly. So, but I'm interested. If there's folks watching the stream that know more about cinematography that can maybe explain why that shot looks so different, I think that'd be really cool because I agree with you.
But a little spoiler for when we get to that minute in a few minutes. Some really interesting musical hints are happening there. Some very interesting music happens in that moment, and I think it is. Well, we'll get there. I can't. Yeah. I will explain it with violin examples because that's a moment where the strings are shining.
And I should say I'm really excited to talk about this because I realized after you invited me to come on and talk about this how little I actually do this with Star Wars movies, even though you think that would be something I would naturally do since I'm a musician and an enormous Star Wars fan, that I would like sit down and like break down the score more. I rarely have done it, so I'm excited to hear. Like watching and listening to your last 2 episodes, I was like, whoa, I didn't even think about that, didn't catch that. So I'm just like excited to hear your take. So
I think that's what happens though, because how long have you been a Star Wars fan?
Since I was like still wet in the bed, like probably
right.
like probably like 5 or 4 or whatever. Yeah.
So Star Wars likewise is one of those things that I grew up loving, like before I was a music expert or whatever,
Oh yeah.
Like we were into Star Wars very early in our journeys. So it is almost, it's for me, it's like it's one of my purest interests, one of my purest passions, because it was from before I had already developed so much of my other interests and skills and identity and all that stuff,
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's probably funny when I started playing drums, it's probably right around the time, like 5 or so, just 2 things that I think I just got into with like a sheer passion of just that is cool, just like cool factor contributed to both of my loves of the thing, like Star Wars. That's so cool. Oh my gosh, Luke Skywalker is the coolest thing ever. Oh my gosh, Ringo Starr is the coolest thing ever. Little did I know, but
I love that. Okay.
Yeah, but at this, so that's just being a young kid and just thinking those 2 things. Playing drums are cool. Laser swords and blasters are cool.
Yeah. It was similar with me, even though violinists normally have the stereotype of like doing it because their parents made them and because it's, I don't know, looks good on college applications. That was not the case with me when I was a kid. I saw violin on TV. I saw someone playing it on KCET or, whatever, public TV. And I was like, I want to do that. That looks like magic. And the bow fascinated me, which is funny because it's kind of has a parallel to like lightsabers or drumsticks, if you think about it. Like having an apparatus. I was obsessed with like magic and stuff as well. And I didn't understand the mechanism of how like the bow hair sits on the string and makes the string vibrate. I didn't understand any of that. I just saw that there's like a stick that goes on the violin. And somehow when you like rub the stick together with the violin, it makes this amazing sound. And I just wanted to do that sound.
Yeah. Just the magic of it and unlocking that magic. I think there's something super, it just, parallel about musical study and studying to be a Jedi. I think those two tracks they're very similar in that
it's self-selecting. Unless, I know a lot of people play music for various reasons that are, totally fine. And not everyone has to like play their entire life and be a professional musician. But I feel like a lot of us that continue are probably didn't feel as like forced to do it, or we're maybe not doing it for a reason, like a reason that an adult would think of.
Absolutely. And what I think what's cool, analogous about the Force in music, it's like everyone actually does participate in music, just like in Star Wars, the Force is in every living being, right?
This is the analogy I make with everyone, which is like...
Yeah, everyone has music. Everyone thinks musically, and musicians are the ones that study and try to unlock the secrets of music, right?
I was just writing this on a Facebook group yesterday.
Totally. So to me, my study in percussion and finding, especially some of my studies with North Indian music, where it's like this really mathematical approach to everything with rhythms and t-highs and subdivisions or stuff, that sometimes it feels like you're unlocking this like secret like Jedi power, when you really delve deep into it, right? You're unlocking the DNA of music, just like the Jedi are unlocking the DNA of like the Force and energy, right? And it's almost like I've loved the new canon stuff that they're adding, both in like the books and the shows, with all these different. I don't know if you've played Jedi Fallen Order, but there's all these different Force powers that they've been introducing lately. Like Grogu has like the healing power, and Rey does in 9. It's almost like there's like little different things that it's kind of like music, right? Like this person over here is like really studying like polyrhythm and these facets of music, but these musicians over here are focusing more on, pop music. So, there's a lot. There's a deep well of analogies between those two things.
I love that you went there though, because I've been thinking, I've been getting a lot of questions, and so I've kind of been trying to figure out when in the episodes I'm going to start addressing, chipping away at listener questions, because most listeners as of now, I think, are people who are not like professional musicians, and the questions are really good. The questions are really good. Sometimes really simple in a way that makes me think of like, oh yeah, I actually don't need that language to describe that thing that's happening. That's just that's just how I've described it. That's how I've linked it for so long. But, it kind of challenges me to think about music in a different way. And what you said about the Force, and like, we know how to maybe describe things that are happening and see patterns that are happening, and can maybe manipulate the power a little bit better. It doesn't mean that other people aren't feeling it. I think, was it David? Someone on Twitter. David, yes, on Twitter, asked me yesterday about, he said that like he felt a similarity between Poe's theme and Leia's. And
Ooh.
when I thought about it, I don't know exactly, and I would have to, I don't know, maybe I'll have him on or something to figure out where that similarity is. But I don't think he was thinking of like, oh, it's, a harmonic progression of the thing that happens there. It's sort of like a felt feeling of like, wait, this feels familiar. It feels reminiscent of something for me. And when I think about it, like, this is just one example. I was like, oh, maybe it's like the major sixth leap, because the major sixths are so prominent in Leia's themes. I can see how that could be it. So like, it would take further testing to be like, sure, does this sound like that? And I could maybe figure out, oh, you're sensing this like major sixth leap. But the fact that like coming in cold, just feeling like, wait, I feel that there is something to investigate here. Like, I love that. And everyone can do that from a different angle.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's the underlying psychology, right? The subconscious idea of the score. Cause you're actually not supposed to be sitting there. A good movie score doesn't make you like stop watching and stop paying attention to what happening and start thinking about the actual score happening. It's supposed to integrate into the music and portray those ideas subconsciously, psychologically, so that you start to feel the themes and hear that, right? And understand what's going on like emotionally in the music without having, or in the movie, without being like, oh, that is the theme from, this character. You're supposed to like, oh, somehow, some reason I'm thinking about Leia right now, and I don't know why.
Yes, like, right? This makes, yes, totally. Oh, and that's the beauty, I think, of John Williams' being so consistent with the motifs. Of course, that's not the only way to compose, but that's just happens to be a very internally consistent way that he composes, which over time it builds up. So, I guess the sequels are when you can really start cashing in on those old motifs, because all it takes is like throwing something in, and then you just feel like, oh, this just tugs at something so deeply familiar.
I remember being in this theater for Force Awakens, and I heard the Resistance theme, and I get they must have played it before this, but I think the first time I heard it was when they were launching off to go to Starkiller Base, and I started thinking to myself, this sounds a lot like the Trade Federation theme. Yeah. I was like, this sounds a lot like the Trade Federation theme from The Phantom Menace. Bum, 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 dum, da-da-dum, bum, da-da-dun, da-dun, da-dun, da-dun,
oh, yeah.
dun, 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 right? Yeah, especially the intro. Bum, bum, ba-da-bum.
Oh, gosh, now I'm confusing them, because, I feel
right?
that.
And I'm like, and I kept thinking to myself, why? Like, what? I mean, they're both like, what? I don't really have like a thought out reason why they're similar. I noticed they were similar, and I was like, that must have been something John Williams did on purpose, and I don't exactly know why.
I've gotten questions about that one too, actually, Jay on Discord, because that one sounds like, it doesn't sound like a Rebel theme. It sounds darker.
Well, that's what's interesting about the flip dynamic of the sequel trilogy, because now the rebels, even though they have the same insignia, are now the government. They're the military. Yeah, they're the resistance now, right? They're the same people that fought as rebels, but now they're resistance. They're the military. They're the established order that are fighting insurgents of their own, but it's a flipped morality where the insurgents are the ones that are trying to reinstall,
I never thought of it that way.
Fascism. But so it would make sense that it would be a military theme for the resistance now, because it's a military, it's a government military these days. So.
That is interesting. That's an interesting way of looking at it. So that actually a good segue to describing some of the action in this scene. This is, for those following along with the soundtrack, this starts around 5 minutes or so, 5 to 6 minutes into track 1, main title and escape. And it actually, this part of the movie lines up exactly with the ending of that. As far as I can tell, this plays out as it is on the soundtrack. And it makes sense because it's not super dialogue heavy. It's, you're viewing a lot of action, you're viewing a lot of things. You heard that laundry list of everything that's going on. A lot of this is sort of like screams that you can't hear. It's like, this is where the scoring is really front and center. So I thought it'd be fun to take a minute of this action. I'm going to narrate it. And to try to match the pacing of it. And then I'm going to play what's happening in the score at that same time without narrating it. And then I will marry the two. And then so that you can try to think of like the parts that I have narrated. And then when I'm playing to try to, James, you can play this game too. And then when I'm playing it, try to think to yourself like, oh, I wonder when that part lines up with that. And then I'll do them together, and I'll try to play and talk at the same time. Though I don't know, James, maybe you can jump in when there's that Timpani roll.
I'll do my best.
Before we get there,
I don't have anything like that sounds as good as that Timpani does in that soundtrack. So maybe.
You don't have a Timpani, and you're not on this Sony soundstage?
Sorry, no, unfortunately not.
Sorry.
I typically when I have a Timpani,
I need to raise my bar for guests.
I have to rent. Normally.
You didn't rent.
Especially in COVID. Don't have a lot of Timpani gigs in COVID these days.
Oh gosh, I know. Oh, I miss playing in a ensemble that even has a Timpani.
That's big enough to have that many people, for sure. Yeah.
So I will remind people of one theme first. You probably won't need recognize. You probably know it, but I just want to refresh and make sure that we have the name for it. So just to make sure everyone here knows the Force theme. Let me try that again and play the right notes.
I loved it. Loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, this is my favorite. Okay,
So good.
So that's what we're calling the Force theme. There's a lot of different names, but I'm going with Frank Lehman's naming for consistency. So this is the Force theme, which makes sense. All right, so this is what's happening. Okay. This is after Paige is knocked unconscious. Okay. Paige gasps as she opens her eyes, and she stamps her foot. Then we see the clicker. It's rattling and beeping on the catwalk above her. And then we see Poe cry out, but you don't hear him. And then we see Kennedy cry out, but you can't hear him. He's saying fire. And then Paige, we do hear this. She kicks, she stamps. She looks really determined and fatalistic. And then we see the full miniatrix. We see the red. It's starting to load up. It's starting to, we know that they're in trouble. We see a shot of Leia looking worried. And then Paige kicks one last time. The clicker falls in slow-mo. It bounces off one of the bombs. Paige gasps as it falls past her. We hear blip, blip, blip. Paige grunts, catches the clicker, presses the button. The bombs fall as Paige falls with the ship. Tally says, "Bombs away." Paige clutches the medallion while solemnly closing her eyes. Flames are engulfing her. Poe sighs. We see the shot of Kennedy and other people on the dreadnought being blown up. Then we sweep into the view of the Resistance. They're on the Raddus. A Resistance monitor says, "Dreadnought down." People cheer. Leia sighs as she sits down. So there's a nice little chunk. And then I'm going to try to recreate what's happening on the violin. At least the violin parts.
Okay, cool. Okay.
Taking a sip of water because, you need to be hydrated to play violin.
I'm just gonna be impressed to see you pull this off. I don't think I can do this.
All right. I'm not going to narrate the action, but I will narrate some things happening in the violin part. I'll narrate the violin action. So we start out with some tremolos, which is like the trembling. It climbs higher. Rest. Sustain. Cut off. Silence. Dramatic timpani roll. Battle of the Heroes. It's very brassy. There's lots of stuff happening. It's a proper cadence. Ends in C minor.
Fantastic.
Oh, I have a little cheerleading section here.
Yes, you do.
There's a lot happening.
That's why you bring on guests, is so they can applaud.
Totally. So what do you think?
Well, you know what? There's so much happening in this scene. What I found interesting listening to the scene again is that the orchestra hits and the underlying chord changes. And we're going to talk about this in the next scene. But it's basically Jedi steps is going on. So you've got when she's stomping and you've got those slow motion moments you mentioned, while all that was happening, you've got boom, boom. You've got these hits in the orchestra, and then we end up. You said we go down to C minor at the end, right?
C sharp minor.
C sharp minor. Well, I'm not sure which key we're in, but we end up actually down in that same key that Jedi Steps ends in.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so the part that you're talking about with the stomps.
Yeah.
So that is this part where everyone's like screaming, but you can't.
Yeah, and there's those huge hits with the orchestra, right? We've got that kind of. Those are actually at least the first part of that is basically the fifth down. We have D or whatever the fifth key that we're in, right? What key are we in, or which minor key are we in?
Well, A minor.
We're in A minor. Okay, so then it's gonna be
for that part.
It's gonna be E, right? It'll be the orchestra hits are in E, A, F or F, A, which is just the Jedi Steps theme, right? Which is Jedi I'm sure Steps he's just used. Exactly. Yeah. So it's really interesting.
What's interesting is when you're describing this, and this is why it's like so important for me especially to talk to people of other instruments, because when I listen to things, I immediately pick out the violin, and to me, I'm like, I picked out different notes because I'm picking out what the violin is playing, but in my head, I'm like, and the brass is doing stuff.
Yeah. And the brass is doing, like I said, what's really interesting, I'm like, wow, I don't think I heard any of that because I'm usually listening to the low end of things. So I'm excited to break down all of that, cool. what the high end of things are, because the first thing I noticed was the low part really like kind of foreshadowing Jedi Steps coming up. And which is interesting because this is Paige's moment. This is like her Jedi Steps. This is like her accepting her role and accepting her fate, really. She's like, nope, this is it. And I remember feeling stressed out when I saw this scene in the theaters. I'm being like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know if I could catch that thing.
I feel like most people couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to listen to this again when we're done because I honestly did not notice a Jedi Steps thing happening there. Yeah. I mean, I was focusing on the Battle of the Heroes part just because I love that motif, and I think it's so it's so random almost that it appears here, but like, is it random? I don't know.
Right.
That's not a motif that is recalled often. Like the Force theme comes up a lot.
Right.
Battle of the Heroes does not come up a lot. It's very rarely comes up. I think this is the only time outside of the prequels that it comes up.
That's interesting.
Because Battle of the Heroes is
not in 9, right? I don't know if it came up.
I don't think so. Let me look at
on the Death Star.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah, I'll check the thematic census that I have that has a list of, when the themes show up, or how many instances of it are in each film. But I don't think this one happens in any. And this is one that I just, since it's a personal favorite, it's one of those ones that I would notice if it were coming up. And so as soon as I heard this in the scene, I was just super surprised. You don't really hear this outside of basically the Anakin Obi-Wan fight.
Right.
And, when I hear this, I think of heroes on both sides and that sort of thing. And I think what an interesting place to put this for Paige, who's a minor character, but she gets her moment of Battle of the Heroes. Yeah. Now on the technical side of things, putting this together, who's to say that like maybe it was part of a temp track, maybe who knows, maybe why it's there, maybe we're over extrapolating, but it is in there, so it is something that it's worth a thought.
Yeah,
that is there,
and he does that quite a bit, and sometimes there's not a very specific reason why those motifs are there. It's not like an on-the-nose reason. Maybe it's something that says, like, we're trying to portray some type of, like, similar emotion to this other theme, right?
Yeah, and I think that's important to remember, is that this is not an exact science. So if people are trying to like QAnon their way through this of of like really following each tiny thing and like making huge extrapolations, I would probably say that's a little bit much. You know, always leave the door open for there to be an alternate explanation. But yeah, I love that the theme is there, and it's there in such a powerful way. It's not like just the theme. It's like a fully harmonized, and like it comes to a cadence, right? It's like. And it really settles. And C sharp minor is, of course, Kylo Ren's key. So, very cool. Okay, so now I'm going to try to narrate it while talking. Through it while playing, so that you know when these things happen. So. We start with the tremolos, and this is also when Paige is, after she's gasped and opened her eyes, starts with her looking up at the clicker. It's very tense. And so you'll notice that the violin tremolos, and tremolo just means like when you basically oscillate the bow back and forth. It kind of trembles. That's what I think of. So, and it ascends, okay? So that's where we start. Getting more tense. And then there's a rest. Poe cries out. Kennedy cries out. Paige kicks. Uh-oh. Leia's worried. Paige is kicking. Sudden cutoff. Because the clicker is falling. There's no music here. You just see the clicker falling. It's bouncing off the bomb. Paige gasps. You hear her go, as it falls past her. You hear the clicker go, blip, blip, blip. And then there's a dramatic timpani roll. That doesn't sound like a timpani.
That's excellent.
Timpani roll. And Paige grunts as she catches the clicker as the timpani basically leads up into it. So it's like, James, timpani, please.
Yes.
And then she catches it. And then immediately after she catches it and presses the button, you get Battle of the Heroes. I'm not in tune, sorry. I'm trying to play too many parts. But it's Battle of the Heroes. And then it cadences. She's clutching the medallion while solemnly closing her eyes. Flames engulf her. She's done. She's done for. And then the part I'm about to play is when the dreadnought's exploding and you see, you know, Kennedy and everyone is toast. And then we see the resistance. Dreadnought down. Force theme as Leia sighs and sits down. What a chain of events.
Yeah.
In that minute, we get all of that. We get the Force theme. We got Battle of the Heroes. I think the inclusion of, what do you make of the inclusion of the Force theme?
Well, it could be a foreshadow for what's going to happen in 20 minutes later in the film, right? You know, you see
Leia Poppins.
20 minutes later, Leia Poppins, right? Or what is it? Is it Leia Poppins that I've heard? There's another pun on that, but yeah, it could be, you know, it could be some type of, but it's also the familiar character that's, you know, representing the strength and the force of the Skywalker lineage, right?
Do you think it's her like feeling that Paige has gone down?
I think absolutely.
Me too.
Yeah. And you know what I love about what happens like right after that is they show her display panel, right? Because what they're foreshadowing later on is that she's about to slap Poe in the face and say like, look at all these people you cost us, right? And it's, she's got the very clear screen of like the red ships that have been gone down, far outnumbering all the ships that are still up. What I found funny about that is that I don't know if you felt this way when you first watched A New Hope when you were a kid, but Leia's in the war room on Yavin 4 looking at the screens. And I remember just thinking, like, what are they even looking at? Like, I can't make heads or tails of like their display screen. I remember being a kid being like, how do they understand like what's going on that screen there? And now we're, in 2017, much more updated. You got a very clear, like, this ship dead, this ship dead, this ship dead, this ship not dead.
Screens are much easier now. Is that what you're saying?
Much easier. The technology for screen, you don't have to really, interpret what these red and blue dots are. So as a child watching this movie, I'm sure I would have been a lot less confused by their display screen. But yeah, back to the music. I find it's interesting. Yeah, I'm there's a lot of things, because I think that's, in some ways though, the Force theme sometimes, obviously it was originally Obi-Wan's theme, right? But then it's kind of over the years.
Yeah, it's like an alternate. It's alternately known as that for sure.
Right. And I think, by the way, isn't technically the Star Wars theme like Luke's theme technically? I think originally they wanted that to be like
inflation. Basically.
Because obviously none of John,
They didn't know there'd be
Lucas,
a billion.
They didn't know they'd be making like constant Star Wars movies for the rest of their lives. So I think the Force theme, I think I've noticed it in Star Wars materials. Usually, obviously, anytime anyone's like floating anything, it's like, let's put in the Force theme. Especially composers that are not John Williams tend to use that as like, hey, viewer, guess what's happening right now?
Basically, the Force theme is, you can think of it as, it's pretty on the nose to when a Force feeling is happening.
Exactly. They're like, it's like composer is like, oh, okay, this is my time. I can use this famous. But sometimes it's just, I think maybe it's almost like a tying back to the something unconscious about the Force and about the mysticism of everything that's going on. It's reminding you that this isn't just like Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica. This is like, it's almost like
reminding you how legendary it is.
Exactly. That's what I guess it's putting that stamp of like, oh, remember that this is like actually fantasy and mysticism going on, even though what you just saw looked like a bit like Guardians of the Galaxy. But remember, like, so I find it that way. And I was actually just watching A New Hope yesterday and just thinking to myself, like, John Williams kind of nailed this on the first viewing, because without the context of like 30 years of what Star Wars became, it's like he really was like, I need to make a score that sounds like it's like the most epic mystical adventure, and not just like Flash Gordon, because he could have made it sound like just a cheesy, because that's kind of how Lucas shot formulated it.
But Lucas did have a pretty clear vision of what he wanted the music to be too. So at least I do know, like, John Williams, it was obviously John Williams wrote the music, but he had a clear directorial vision, which helps. I don't know if you've ever like composed for media where the director's like, I want this, and then you like give them the thing, and then they're like, actually no violin. Actually, take out all the violin parts. Actually, do it like this, and you're like, oh my god, okay.
Yes, that's so true. I think I did hear that Lucas had put over some like,
he had temp tracks of Stravinsky and like
Holst, right? And and I think that's probably had a lot to do or work with. But I just think,
but still, John Williams nailed. You're right. He definitely nailed it.
And you can just hear it. It sounds different than any other sci-fi property because of that underlying
internal
feeling.
Consistency. And I think regarding the Force theme in this situation, I feel like it very much is Leia feeling that Paige has gone down. And when you mentioned the screen that she's looking at first I thought you were going to mention the fact that she feels it before seeing it happen. If I'm interpreting the screen correctly, like you see, like she knows that, both Luke and Leia and Yoda and, basically any of the Force users, they can feel when, someone close to them is gone. They can feel when someone's in pain, and they can feel that sort of connection. And even without knowing, that Leia's going to have her moment later on. We already do have it established that Leia is a force, she's a force user. And even if even if at this point we didn't know that she's ever, gone through Jedi training, we do know that like even in the original trilogy, she and Luke at least have a connection, and she can feel when stuff is happening to Luke. So, it was a reminder of just how interconnected a lot of the, people in Star Wars are. And, especially people like Leia, you can just feel when one of your own is lost. And absolutely. I think that's really beautiful. What you said about reminding you also that this is Star Wars, damn it. That's funny. And I bet that is a hook that like may have kept me interested if my attention started to wane. I mean, I don't think my attention was waning at all when I saw this the first time, but generally speaking, aside from Star Wars, I'm not an action movie person at all. Like this type of scene would sort of be like, if the entire movie was this, I would have a hard time understanding it and getting into it. And what I would really be hanging on to is like, oh, that's more like, a moment the Force theme came up. Now there's something I can read into it and everything. Because I'm not like I'm not good at understanding war movies and just
likewise
stuff like this.
Honestly, they announced that new Rogue Squadron movie that's coming out, and I'm sure that Patty Jenkins is going to nail it. And it's awesome to see that finally, we've got an incredible, female director directing a mainstream Star Wars movie. So I'm definitely not excited about it, but it's definitely not like my first pick of Star Wars type movies.
A whole other conversation
you know what I mean?
We should have. we should have this conversation separately.
Yeah. But yeah, the Rogue Squadron thing where it's like just pew pew and ships flying around shooting stuff, it's kind of like not what I get excited about Star Wars either. So I totally agree with you. Like these scenes are awesome and they need to be in Star Wars, but they're definitely not like they're not like the big ones to stand out. It's really the next scene that comes later is like the stuff that I get really excited about, which the internal relationship in the Jedi scene. But I also think you're right in terms of stuff that brings you out. This whole sequence, both through sound design and through the cinematography, I remember watching this in the theater and being like, "Oh, this is a different language than we've heard in any Star Wars property so far, in that there's slow motion, okay, which is not something that had ever happened in any Star Wars film yet. There's never slow motion.
Really? I haven't
never.
That sounds right, but interesting.
Lucas never did flashbacks or slow motion. And the Last Jedi has both. And there's a lot of slow motion and
lots of slow mo.
Yeah. So and also you've got that sound design, which is basically a POV sound design of the tinnitus, the ear ringing. Totally not something we've ever seen in Star Wars, where it's literally like the sound design focuses laser focus on Paige's perspective, and it's like, this is what she's hearing. She's hearing nothing right now. It's silent. You've got the ear ringing of there was just an explosion. And I remember being like, whoa, this is like a new modern language for Star Wars that I have not seen before. And honestly, this movie stretched me as a Star Wars fan, being like, oh, we're going to have a different type of sound, like I said, sound and cinematography in Star Wars movies from now on. So just get ready. This isn't George Lucas's Star Wars anymore. This is Rian Johnson's Star Wars. And I was happy to come out of that zone because of this movie. And actually, the scene right before this, right, BB-8 is the one that says I got a bad feeling about this, right? And that's another big, like, this is different. We have the droids speaking the famous line this time around, right? So
3PO is right.
Sequences. Oh, does he say that in any of the films? Does he say
I have a bad feeling about this?
Yeah, does he ever say that?
I feel like yes.
I feel like this is like a Star Wars pub 3PO. Trivia question. You're like, you need to know who says it in every film. But anyway, so yeah, I found that particular moment
the tinnitus that's a really good point. James is referring to the part before I started playing, which is after the explosion.
Right.
And you just, the ringing.
The ringing and then the
familiar
timpani
ringing.
interrupts it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. The sound design of, I think, in these segments that we're talking about today, I think is just is like groundbreaking in a lot of ways than the music, because it's so unique. There's so much that's different about it.
Yeah. Do you have any? The part that really stands out for me is when there's those sustained notes, and then you see the people screaming, crying out, but you don't hear them. Like Poe, it's like note, Poe, note, Kennedy, another note, but then you hear Paige. So it really reinforces Paige's perspective. You know what I mean? I mean after the Poe, Kennedy saying fire, and then we hear Paige going stamp, stamp, stamp. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, and same thing. Something that we haven't really seen before in Star Wars. It's just like slow motion, silent. It's just such an intimate moment for Paige, and I think it's important because we get to connect with her for one. We all get to be her for a second, and then she's gone. And obviously it cues in on her what's the
medallion?
Her medallion. Yeah, I don't remember what it's called in the movie, but and of course that just all this whole moment just makes Paige the star, and I love it. And so that later on we can really understand Rose's journey through this film. I think they really need to do a Disney Plus Paige show for sure. I would watch that every week.
Quick check. Can you still hear me and stuff?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Cool.
Okay.
Should we transition to what happens after that?
Yeah. So much. There's so much to talk about in this
Hux, which is the hilarious part where you hear the trombone. What is it? Trombone stabs. It's like, boom, and Hux. Can you,
yes.
I don't know. Maybe you can describe better what's happening there. It's funny though.
He's really becomes the heel of, the comic. He's kind of a step down in status in this movie, and I think the score alludes to that for sure.
We see him as someone with more to lose than we realize. Someone who's maybe less secure than we thought.
Exactly, and right off the bat, the scenes before this, Poe is razzing him, right? And yeah, just that close-up shot with the score, I think it is a brass instrument that kind of just shows and there's that moment of silence when
it's timed with his head turns. They do I feel like this sequence has a lot of you hear music and then you see action corresponding, and then you hear music and then you see another head turn, and then
yes, and the silence right after the Resistance shoots off into hyperspace, I love, because it's this moment
that sound,
where they're just yeah.
Oh, I love that sound of shooting off into hyperspace. That is something I wrote down, but I don't know how to describe it. I wrote Redis in hyperspace sound. Hyperspace, the sounds of hyperspace is a whole topic unto itself.
It just hits. It hits right there,
Snoke's gravelly voice. I prefer Snoke as a projection.
Likewise. Yeah. Well, what's really interesting is I remember this moment in the film being oh, okay, I guess he actually does have the Force, because I remember leading the 2 years after Force Awakens, I was is Snoke the Wizard of Oz? Is he just this fake? Is he just this is my Snoke theory for 2 years was I was Snoke is a fake. I bet he's going to be controlling everything from the shadows, and it's actually not even a Force sensitive person, but first, he just drags Hux back and forth. I'm okay, well, there you go. There's that theory for the last 2 years.
I've never been a fan of Snoke.
Yeah, I was happy to see him go.
100%. I was in the Force Awakens, I was okay, we have a new. Okay, I guess we're scared of him. Okay, and The Last Jedi, when they just handily got rid of him, I was okay, glad we're not going to belabor this point. I'm glad, just get him out of the way. Let's just but I also confess that I felt that way about General Grievous in Attack of the Clones too. I was also like, is he really going to be someone, I feel like Grievous is an acquired taste from, getting into the cartoons. But just watching Attack of the Clones, I felt like, is he really, I'm not scared of him. He's a guy with a bunch of lightsabers. Come on, just get rid of him. Like, I don't want to watch too many battles with him.
And Obi-Wan cuts off like 4 of his, or like 2 of his arms, like immediately, right? Like it's like, he's like, I got all these lightsabers. And then within like 1 second of the fight, Obi-Wan like takes off like 4 of them. And you're like, okay. Well,
goodbye, Grievous.
Yeah.
Goodbye, Snoke. Not yet. But in this part, exactly. I can appreciate his gravelly voice. That is some nice sound mixing there.
General.
It's so, I don't know. I feel it. I feel his voice. It's a very deep rumble there. It's
Andy Serkis. It's amazing.
I don't know him from any other things except this.
He's Gollum.
Okay.
From Lord of the Rings, and then the other one he did was he was Caesar, the main chimpanzee for all the remakes of the Planet of the Apes movies. I don't know if you ever saw those, but he does remember. Like it's crazy what he does in those movies. Like, and his voice, like he does all the sound design for all those like all the chimpanzee voices, which is like this crazy his voice acting is incredible in this movie and in the first 2 movies of the sequel trilogy.
Right.
So good.
So I had a question for you into this next scene where we see Finn. Finn wakes up from his coma, bangs his head on the bubble helmet. What's that called? A helmet. What is that sound? Because it sounds like it's a hit. Is it Foley? Is it percussion?
Yeah, I listened to that a couple of times after you had kind of mentioned that. I believe it is definitely Foley. It sounds to me like it's got like it sounds like it's a it's almost, I bet it was probably a plastic like barrel. It sounds like they're hitting like some type of, I'd be really curious at how they created it, but definitely I think it's in the and I remember hearing that sound too, because it also has like this muffled
I thought it was
sound.
Kind of a timpani almost at some point.
It does kind of sound like an instrument, but I think after listening to it a couple of times, I was like, I think that's just part of their Foley track. But again, here's another example where you've got the sound design where it's from the perspective of the person you're seeing, because it's got this sound where it sounds like you are under the helmet as opposed to you're in the room hearing the right. You are Finn in that moment, and you hear boom, like, and you can't really hear anything else other than the beeping in the room, right? So there's all these moments where they're Rian Johnson is so good with characters. And John Williams,
but also
worked so well with
this is a shout out to Matthew Wood and Ren Kleiss, the sound supervisors for this.
Absolutely.
As well.
Absolutely.
That that's interesting, because if we had not been from the perspective of Finn hearing that, we just wouldn't hear that sound because we wouldn't be close enough. That's a sound that you wouldn't hear unless you were right there. And so we wouldn't really be we wouldn't be brought straight into the action of Finn coming to and, kind of that moment where he's alone. We wouldn't be able to witness that I don't know. It would just sound like a cat wriggling in a box, maybe, where you're like, oh, something's some little things happening over there.
Yeah. Which is, what I'm realizing about this movie is there's a lot of solitude in this movie. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of there's a moment where Finn's by himself and waking up. Like, everybody starts this movie alone. Finn wakes up in his tube. Poe starts out in the X-Wing. Rey's alone on Ahch-To. Kylo Ren starts out alone in the elevator. Later on, everybody is starting their journey alone. And you get these really intimate moments with I'm just realizing that right now. Like, every character gets every main character in the film starts out this movie with just them, right? And we get their internal perspective. So, and the sound does that same thing. It's kind of interesting.
That's such a good point. Yeah. Wow. And then, of course, Leia doesn't start that way, but she has her whole coma moment where she herself is alone in that room, as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a very good point.
I really want to see if anybody can. I I wish that I'm not sure if they do, but the droid binary language, I'm very curious if anyone's ever listened to BB-8 and to see if it's consistent, because there's that scene where like Poe's like, Finn naked, leaking, bag,
right.
And which was just funny to me, because that means that like that's what, like, Finn is almost like understands like a little bit of what he's saying, but not everything. So he's like only picking out like the so yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's one way to look at it, because when presented with only that information, we don't know if that means that maybe Poe is fluent in BB-8's language, and that's how BB-8 speaks in fragments, or if that's only all Poe can pick up. And I like that reading of it. That's all. Yeah, Poe kind of has lazily learned, like, he would need 3PO, because I think we've established in Rise of Skywalker that to understand BB-8 fully, they still do rely on 3PO.
Oh yeah,
and it makes sense to me that Poe would just be able to pick that out.
Right.
It's such specific language that he would have had to learn. Leaking, Finn, water dripping, or whatever.
Bag.
Yeah, leaking bag. In the audiobook of this, there's sound and stuff as well, but they use different music in that. So I that makes me curious about if it's a completely separate, like, it almost made me wonder if they had different stem, like, they're definitely working with different stems for the audiobook version of this, but I would think, like, the book always comes out after the movie. So it makes me, so I'm used to the book kind of being able to retcon anything to rectify anything from the movie. But the audiobook sound design so far, because I'm just keeping up with it along with the movie 5 minutes at a time, it makes me wonder if it was developed concurrently, because the music wasn't there.
Interesting.
Yeah, so far at least. Who knows?
I have only recently, like, my first time I've ever listened to an audiobook of a Star Wars property was recently, and I realized, like, I think I'm missing out, because they do produce these things, like, incredibly well, like, in terms of just the full experience.
I'm on the fence
sound
on
effects.
That. Yeah,
you're on the fence. Well, maybe just the only one I've heard is the Light of the Jedi, the new High Republic book. And they did an amazing job with that particular one. And I just, like, I never listened to audiobooks. So, like, it's interesting
I'd listen to them sometimes, but with Star Wars, I usually default to reading it, because I feel when I listen to it, I will miss out on the spellings of things, which makes it more difficult for me to recognize things later. But what, I check these out from my library. So whatever version comes up first is what I start. So that's how I got into the audiobook this time. I was up for the challenge, and thought it would be a good opportunity to hear what was going on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really this is my first time, I think, hearing a Star Wars audiobook. Other than tiny clips. So there's no music when Finn is leaking.
Interesting.
Not in the audiobook. Back to the movie. This scene where Finn is leaking, there's no music, no score.
Right.
It's just all the sound of him leaking, squeaking, leaking, and their dialogue. And it makes it seem like a very austere environment. And it also, time-wise, it makes it feel like it's happening in time. To me.
Yeah, because the last sequence was so everywhere, slow motion, stretch time. That's interesting. It really grounds you. It gives you a sense of, like
the pacing
we're
of
back.
it.
Yeah, and we're back. Like, we're back, and now we're feeling the ramifications of what just happened. Right? Everyone's, like, on the ship, and you're able to sit in reality for a second and just, like, sit and
like,
absorb.
take the drama out of it, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very grounding.
And because we're gonna go into a scene where it's, like,
more
super
sweeping
dramatic
stuff, and yeah. I think one of the biggest roles of music in films is manipulating the sense of time and pacing, and just how fast or slow things are unfolding. What do you think?
Absolutely, and putting a sense of because time, I think, is valued by moments of wait and moments of waiting. Yeah, I didn't mean to use two homophones there, but I did. So waiting for something big to happen and having something big happen. And usually when those things that are big that happen, they usually feel like they take a long time. And usually when you're kind of not having those moments, sometimes time can slip by, you know? And I think the music really helps it, like, drawing those moments out, you know?
Yeah.
That are big and, yeah.
What do you think of Finn and Poe? This is like Finn being, I don't know, he comes off as silly in this scene. And the sound, I'm sure it's intentionally meant to be funny. All the squirting and everything.
Yes.
And then the first thing he says is, "Where's Rey?" And that's a quick cut. Quick cut to sweeping views of the island of Ahch-To. And we start to hear, now we're on track 2 of the soundtrack. I think it's called Ahch-To Island, this track. Is that right? Ahch-To Island? Yeah. It starts with Ahch-To.
Yeah, maybe.
And we have a moment where the cellos are shining here. And the music, it starts with the motif of Jedi steps, which we first hear at the end of The Force Awakens. So actually, not only does the scene kind of pick up, but the music also picks up where it left off, at least on the Ahch-To side of things.
Yeah. I went and watched those 2 scenes just to hear the different scores recently.
Did you notice anything?
And I didn't notice. I didn't listen to it enough to really pick out the exact differences. They're very. I think they're in the same key.
Yeah, they are.
I don't have. Yeah, and but like I said, the feeling, like they're recontextualized very differently. Obviously, you know.
I love that little harp thing. It goes like,
yeah. Yes.
So I guess I'll narrate what happens musically there. So as soon as Finn says, "Where's Rey?" Immediately this music starts, and it's very clearly outlining G minor. It's not, it's not like no sevenths, no like added notes into it. It's like very clearly G minor. And then you hear like a plucked instrument. I believe it's a harp. It sounds like kind of like a harp.
Yeah.
And just to really underscore the fact that it's G minor. And technically it goes. But, it's G minor. And then what is this? She hands him the lightsaber. Okay. I want to zoom in on the last part of that. Now, we established that it's very much centering around G minor, very obviously. And the beginning of the theme, when it's just sweeping views of the island, it's all very classic G minor. Very. That's a simple G minor as it gets. And then just excuse my out of tuneness. When Rey hands him the lightsaber, things start to get a little bit interesting, a little meandering, and I'll explain why. So when you're in the key of G minor, I want to introduce very simply the concept of a leading tone. And what that is like, if you consider that a scale in this instance, like a minor scale, you know, in Western music theory terms, has 7 notes: G, A, B flat, C, D, E flat, F, and G. The leading tone of any key is pretty much the note before the, so how do I explain this? The note before it repeats. So basically it's a note that wants to, like you kind of feel a tension, like you feel like it wants to lead you and resolve back to the main note, which is called the tonic or the root, or, you know, or Roman numeral 1, just it wants to go back home, which is the G. So if you're on an F sharp, which comes right before the G, it basically wants to round to the nearest key. It wants to round back to the G. Yeah, sort of like in chemistry, I think with electrons, if you have, never mind, I should stop this analogy. But like when you have like 7 electrons, it's like, I just remember that it's like very unstable. James is like shaking his head like, stop. It's like unstable and it wants to gain another electron because 7 is, am I getting this right? Just if someone...
Probably, but definitely out of my like memory of my chemistry class. But yeah.
It feels familiar, like the Force theme. It feels like
unstable.
Like, let me just play a G minor scale, and you tell me if this feels resolved. Now, where do you want that to go? You probably won't feel satisfied until I finish it off. So, okay. So all of this is to say is when Rey hands Luke the lightsaber, it goes. That's the leading tone. So you would think it would go here. So if I were to rewrite it very simply, it would go. But no. That doesn't happen. That would be too easy. It's we're not ready to resolve this matter. He needs to stare at the lightsaber and meander in his thoughts a little bit longer. So it goes. Still going on. Then we outline an F sharp diminished. Like it doesn't just resolve. It keeps dancing around the point before it kind of resolves to a pseudo place. So I'll play that again. So keep in mind, this is the beginning. Just using the island. She hands him the lightsaber. Takes us a very long time. It doesn't even go back to G minor. It goes to D, which is also pretty stable within that key. But I just feel like that's I feel like that's a very on the nose, in a good way, part where the music kind of tells you that, there's some conflict here. There's more behind this than just the simple, oh yeah, you gave me the lightsaber. Yeah, let's go. Like, no.
Exactly. It feels more foreboding and more confusing and more mysterious than the viewer expected what actually seeing and hearing Luke Skywalker talk after 40 years, right? That what they thought it was going to be like, Like if you showed this scene to somebody 20 years ago and say, this is actually what it's going to be like to see Luke Skywalker again, and listen to the music and listen to the emotion that you're hearing, you'd be like, what? What happened? What happened? Why is this so foreboding and tense, right?
I feel like if you were to cut this scene off, to show a new viewer this before the part where he throws the lightsaber, so before we get, the answer, if you were to just look at Luke and hear this music, you would know that, maybe this, I have a sinking feeling about this. Like, you wouldn't even have to see him throw the lightsaber for the point to be made with the music.
Absolutely. So let me ask you a question real quick. So in terms of the theme, does it go, when I was listening to it, does it go up the octave the way you're playing it?
No, it's just because cello. Just because
that's why I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Because there's something
Totally.
when I looked at I was like really interested, and I'll play it with the down octave.
Please.
What is it? Well, sorry.
If
Something
my
like that.
if my viola weren't at the shop right now, I should have played this on my viola. But yeah, actually, that's a good point too. Is I kind of simplified it and I focused on the notes, but because it's a violin and it doesn't go as low as a cello or viola, I jumped the octave and went up. But really, you would be getting all these leaps downward.
And that's what I wanted. When I was listening to it, I was like, that struck me when I started to actually plunk it out. And obviously, I should have practiced it more to actually play it accurately. But what I've noticed is you think the name of the theme is Jedi Steps. That alludes to a lot of different things. It's Rey's first steps as a Jedi, right? Her first steps to she's going and finding Luke Skywalker. It's finally at the end of that movie, The Force Awakens, where she actually decides like, hey, I'm going to actually like receive the call. So she's taking her steps. She's literally going up the Jedi steps, which, because we find out this is the Jedi Island, right? Yeah, and so those are steps that are Jedi steps. But what's interesting is that the where you halfway through that theme, you end up an octave down than you started, right?
Yes. Oh, I love that. So
you're climbing
take steps up and take a lot of steps down.
And that's exactly what ends up happening to Rey at the end, in this, and Luke, right? She thinks she's going on this journey to find, and it starts out by going up, and then,
yeah, and then
we're done.
And that is actually very notable because in my spare time, sometimes I like to chart out, just map out without using note names, just the shape of where the phrase is going, because, heroic themes in what I've observed so far, they tend to like always go up. Like, if you think of like a lot of the light side of the Force themes, they ascend, and a lot of the dark ones descend, like Kylo.
Yes.
But then if you get like, I don't know, pick any like, or like in Yoda. What is it? Well, you get the point. Like a lot of these, they go up, and Jedi Steps, it goes down, but it does share one of the characteristics that other light themes seem to possess, which is big leaps. Because I think like dark side themes and oftentimes battle and war themes, they tend to have like smaller steps, like or like it's all cramped within a smaller set of steps. And so, all the soaring heroic themes tend to like they go like fourths and fifths and sixths. And this one does have the like fourths and fifths and sixths, but it's like the falling steps is just, it seems unique to this one.
It does. And it's also interesting that the first intervals are a mirror image of the main Star Wars theme, right? And so it's instead of boom, ba, da, 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 it's boom, boom, right?
Yeah.
Just that fifth gets flipped, right? We start on the fifth and we go downwards.
Because in the main theme it goes up a fourth and then up a fifth. And in this one it goes fifth first and then fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting.
It also,
and
I have to
some
say,
of this is a little bit of like, some of this is
yeah, we're
like
doing
you
a little
said,
bit
like,
of the like trying to
the
a little few,
QAnoning.
too many. Yeah, we're doing a little bit of that. But this
it's,
is like,
you know,
but I think this is,
it is.
we're not writing papers on this and saying this is definitely it. But I think like I encourage anyone really when listening to stuff and trying to determine what is happening, like test a few ideas out, like just to try to notice what's happening. You know, it may lead to something and it may not, but you do have to like ask yourself sometimes, oh, what are the intervals? Oh, where else have I seen that? Okay, file that away for later. And, you know, it might be something, it might not, but it's still,
Right.
it doesn't hurt as long as you're not like saying, hey, this means this because of that, which I don't know. I feel like a lot of music theory YouTube does. It annoys me.
Yeah.
And I will say, I don't know if this is intentional. I'll have to get Lorenz on the show because Lorenz played on the score. Lorenz Goma,
Oh,
you know, from
great.
CalArts.
Yeah.
I feel like this reminds me of Cezanne's introduction to introduction and Rondo Capriccioso. It starts like, I haven't played it in years, but it starts like in the exact same way, pretty much. And it also kind of reminds me of like Elgar variations a little bit, Elgar Enigma variations.
Yeah.
And I think it's because of the like leaps and I don't know what it is. I have to look into that more, maybe.
I can hear that.
Yeah, it's a beautiful theme. It's one of my favorites.
It's gorgeous, and I think you're spot on with both the leading tone and the tension and the dominance of the unsureness of the situation. It's also just so interesting to just see like a cloaked Luke Skywalker with this mysterious theme around him, you know? It's just, I remember just feeling like The Force Awakens when you see that, you're just like, what? I mean, that's, in some ways it fits what they wanted through the story, but it also like, it's almost like a marketing move where it's like, cheers, y'all get on the internet and get real excited about what's about to happen next, and we're gonna make some music that will leave you dripping with anticipation. You know,
I have to say, like they left it really conveniently open ended there at the end of TFA.
Oh yeah. Well, sometimes I find it interesting, you know, to think about like, oh, you know, The Last Jedi is where Luke shows his darkness, but it's like Force Awakens. We knew that he wasn't part of that fight the entire way through. You know, he was on that island. You know, JJ put him on that island. Anyway, without getting to go down that thing. But anyway, the point is that, you know, we needed an answer of like why, and that music is definitely part of what made us feel that feeling like, oh, something is not right here. And sure enough, it wasn't right there.
Yeah,
you know,
it's beautiful. Oh, it's
really
going to be
is.
exciting to get into future minutes. I'll have to have you on again, James.
Yeah, I would
It's
love
really
to come
great talking to you.
Yeah.
I think later on we'll see. I'll keep losing my voice because I just talk about Star Wars every day now.
It's great.
I see like Rey's theme fits in very well because it's also a very Rey's themes are in A minor and they fit very nicely into the Ahch-To scenes. I think it'll be interesting to go into those. So anyway, listeners, this one didn't have too many extra things from the soundtrack. It really is the end of track 1 and the beginning of track 2 with the silence in the middle. I mean, with just the POV sounds of Finn squirting in the middle. What an action-packed 5 minutes.
Absolutely.
Wow, editors. I would be the worst movie editor ever.
It's impressive.
Yeah.
It's definitely impressive. And I love how the scenes move into each other. Like, where's Rey? And then later on, you know, where's Han? And then you're going to fire, you know, cuts right to Kylo later on, right?
Yeah.
So the editing is fantastic.
James, if you could play any percussion instrument on this score, what would it be?
In The Last Jedi?
Yeah.
Or in this minutes.
either
specifically. Well, definitely that timpani rod. Give me that.
Do you like playing timpani?
I love timpani. There's part of my life of my classical training in which, and sometimes I still feel this way, where like if you just told me for the rest of your life I'm just gonna play, early classical timpani parts like Haydn and Mozart, Beethoven, for the rest of my life, I might say yes. It's so much fun to just play 5-1 and play, because those parts, like literally the instruments back then, you couldn't tune them, right? Yeah, or if you wanted to tune them, you couldn't do them in the middle of a piece because they would be raw hide skins, right?
Oh.
So the pitch is available to the.
Is that why so many things in the classical era are like in C and G? I don't know. Maybe I'm making
because of the timpani?
Yeah.
Probably not. I mean, you could tune them to whatever pitch you wanted, but you could to do so. Like nowadays, it's a pedal, and you just instantly. Right. But you couldn't do that within the piece because it would be a raw hide that you literally had to torque around and make it a perfect pitch, and you basically just do that right before the piece, and then you're stuck with those pitches throughout the piece, right?
Yeah, more like a.
So that's why the timpani part's usually never more than 2 drums, and that's why. And sometimes the composers get creative. They're like, we're on a 4 chord right now, and the timpanist doesn't have that pitch, so just play your 1, just because that's part of the chord. So there's like a lot of parts, or there's movements where the timpani just doesn't play, and I don't know if that was anything more than a logistical decision, right? So, but it's so much fun because you're just playing. You get to just double the brass.
Bong, bong, bong.
All day. So some part of me is like, if somebody just told me like, hey, you're going to play with this chamber orchestra for the rest of your life playing this music, I'd be like, yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
What role does timpani play in Star Wars? Like, because it seems like timpani is used in, key scenes, key parts.
Oh, yeah. There's some major moments in obviously in the main score, it's huge. It's basically
in what way? In action? In
the main theme, the main Star Wars title theme, it's big with the brass. It basically dun 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 dun. You've got those huge hits that it doubles up with the orchestra. And then there's some moments where it just has these beautiful accented parts. Like I want to say that the sail barge scene has a decent amount of timpani on it. I could be wrong about that. I'll have to check after. But there's scenes like the sail barge scene where you've got these big accented parts. I want to say that Luke's interaction with Kylo at the end of this, spoilers. Oh, yeah. You've got some big xylophone and timpani parts there that are really that jut out. It creates a menace. I think there's it creates that swashbuckling menace that you get a lot in Star Wars, where there's like a sense of adventure, and I think timpani brings that out, where you've got these hits and it just sounds big and grandiose when you've got timpani as part of the score. So
I love timpani. John Williams uses a lot of timpani.
Oh yeah. Well, he's got good influence. I mean, obviously Stravinsky has amazing timpani parts, notably The Rite of Spring. A lot of, Holst has a lot of great timpani parts. Tchaikovsky has great timpani parts. And these are some of the big influences on some of his most romantic scores, obviously. So
the role in the orchestra, like, I know you weren't literally there, but the recording orchestra for this, pretty, for the most part, standard setup. So normally the timpani player is a separate player, right? And then there's a number of other percussion players splitting other parts. Is that how that happens, or?
Normally in an orchestra, I should say most traditionally, the timpanist is just the timpanist and handles timpani.
Because they're like the bedrock, basically. If the timpani's off, it's extremely obvious.
That's true. Yeah, and it's also just a totally different technique palette than other types of percussion. There's like so many different schools of thought on timpani. And then the rest of the percussionists typically are separate from the. I'm sure there's plenty of orchestras in which there's a lot of rotating going on, and sometimes I believe there's some orchestras where there's like for a season somebody might play timpani and be the timpanist, and then they rotate for another season. But typically the percussionists are separate. So the people playing the snare drums and the bass drum and the cymbals, etc., are usually stuck on. That's called battery. That's called the battery part of the percussion section.
Is the non-timpani parts?
Yeah, well, specifically the drums, the snare.
Oh, just the drums all as a whole, like the whole drums, the whole percussion section or just the drum part?
The drum part is typically what's called the battery, right?
Got it.
Like
and so xylophone would be like separate.
Snare drum, exactly. And those the mallet instruments, right? And then we have auxiliary percussion, which is like triangle, tambourine, castanets, stuff like that. But nowadays, especially in sessions, I think they probably these days still with Star Wars, they're still bringing in, like a pretty standard orchestral setup. But a lot of soundtracks these days, if you're a percussionist, you're expected to basically come in and do everything, that's kind of...
And sometimes layer them at separate times, though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Not in Star Wars, though.
Right.
Oh, do you have anything else to say?
Which I'm sure Ludwig Göransson does plenty of layering and stuff in The Mandalorian these days. Obviously, it's a pretty non-traditional setup for The Mandalorian, I think.
I think The Mandalorian
at least I think so.
Just uses a DAW. I don't think The Mandalorian has an orchestra.
I definitely feel like I've seen some video of Ludwig conducting a group for the score, but I know that there's lots of synthetic sounds.
Yeah.
Like he uses lots of synthesizers. There's lots of he uses like straight up like sampled beats in that score.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. It's really cool to see that.
He's mastered his DAW basically.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, maybe I'll have to get someone later who has insider info on the scoring of that. But yeah. What a good discussion. Do you have anything else to say about these minutes? You'll definitely be back on the show, so if you missed anything, you can...
I just think I really, like I said earlier in the show, I would love to see more Paige and Rose stories. I love Paige. I think she was, like, that moment was so cool. And I want to see Disney do more Resistance type of like shows or cartoons or whatever. I want to know more about the Resistance, and I think that moment with like people like Rose, where you get to see this like beautiful, highlighted, heroic story within this within this second, we've understood who Rose is and her whole story, and I just want to see more of that kind of stuff. So I love that moment of these little smaller characters, and I think the score and everything does such a great job to highlight that. So
I agree. Oh, okay. Well, this was a long discussion, and I'm sure people who are still listening to the end of this, if you have questions, definitely let me know. As I said, I'll start to tackle them, start to chip away at them during the episodes. If you have anything you want to ask James, or if you want to look up James, where can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me just about everywhere at James Waterman Music, Facebook and Instagram, and then on Twitter at James Waterman. And you can find me jameswatermanmusic.com. And I do a lot of different stuff: percussion, songwriting, composing, etc. So
yeah, James is amazing. Yes, when we will definitely chat more after this. What else can I say? Oh, a couple people left reviews on Apple Podcasts, which I don't get like emailed or anything when that happens. I just happened to check because I was, trying to share the show with someone, and I saw that 2 people left reviews. Thank you so much. I don't know why I wasn't expecting that, but I'm since this is just new, haven't really gotten the whole business stuff set up, so I haven't solicited reviews. But thank you, and if you would like to do that, you can do that, I believe, on Apple, and I don't know how to do that on the other platforms. So good luck. You can find me on Twitter at ChrysantheTan, and I think I'm also at Star Wars Museman, but I've like changed that name a few times and never tweeted from it. So also good luck with that. And you can always email podcast@starwarsmusicminute.com or chat with me on Discord. And as I said, keep the questions coming. And if you have scenes that you want, that you have specific questions about that are still coming up in this movie or other movies, let me know so that when I get to that scene, can pay extra attention to what you're hearing. Thanks again to Pete and Alex from Star Wars Minute for being the inspiration for this format. And I think that's all I have to say today. Thank you so much. Hope this was interesting. Next episode is next week for minutes 16 through 20. Yep. That's what that is. All right. Thanks for joining me on Star Wars Minute. Nope. Wrong podcast. Wrong show. Oh, God. Let's try that again. Star Wars Music Minute. There we go.